You're watching Africa News, bringing you the top stories on the continent this hour. An international response on a large scale. Aid groups call for the international community's help in the Central African Republic's growing humanitarian crisis. A month on, but are we any closer to reaching a political solution? Ethnic violence in South Sudan shows a scarce sign of abating, with ongoing talks between warring factions proving complicated. And according to one news agency, 4 Rwandans are being held in connection with the killing of former Rwandan spy master Patrick KAREGEYA. We speak to the Rwandan opposition. Hello and welcome. Firstly, in the Central African Republic, aid groups are calling for an international response to the unfolding humanitarian crisis. This following weeks of sectarian violence. Well, despite signs of calm returning to the capital, Bangui, the UN says hundreds of thousands of people are now displaced after fleeing the deadly conflict which pitted Muslims against Christians. Well, many now find themselves in overcrowded camps for the displaced, where food distribution has been hindered due to insecurity. For more, earlier I spoke to Denise Brown of the United Nations World Food Programme.
It's extremely complicated and rests extremely complicated. Despite the changes in the country in the past few days, we're having a very challenging time delivering assistance, particularly to Bosango in the north of the capital, because of the insecurity of the road. So our trucks have not been able to get through. So our distributions have been suspended in certain parts of the country. In Bao, where I was today, speaking with about 40,000 people who've been displaced by the violence, they are not ready to return home. Our assistance is getting through, but they've been traumatized by the violence. And for the moment, they don't feel that the situation is secure enough for them to go back home. And yesterday in the camp in the airport, where they had the opportunity to sit and talk to a number of women, they don't feel secure in the camp. They don't feel secure about going home. So the situation rests extremely, extremely complicated.
Now, Denise, are the consequences of having this food distribution hindered, are they beginning to show in a way of, I don't know, malnutrition perhaps?
The World Food Programme and UNICEF are anticipating a nutrition crisis in the coming weeks. There is food insecurity in the country. People have fled their homes. They've left everything behind. The agricultural season has been missed. Prices have skyrocketed in the markets. And sanitation conditions in the camps are far from ideal. So this is creating a perfect storm for a nutrition crisis.
Well, meanwhile, the African Union has called for more troops to help bring stability to the Central African Republic. Officials say the 4,000-strong AU-backed MISCA force struggled to contain recent sectarian bloodshed. The call for more soldiers comes as the country's National Transitional Council prepares to elect a new interim president on Saturday. The NTC's current head, Alexander Ferdinand Ngende, has confirmed he won't be running for that job. In other news on the continent, it's been 1 month since conflict in South Sudan first threatened to bring the world's newest nation to the brink of civil war. Violence that erupted in mid-December has reopened old ethnic rifts between Dinkas and Nuers. The death toll in the unrest is impossible to pinpoint, but the UN estimates it's now well over 1,000 people. Well, over 400,000 have fled their home, while talks between opposed factions appear to be bearing little fruit. In the meantime, the South Sudanese are eager to regain some sense of normality. Nicolas Germain reports.
It's yet another consequence of the fighting in South Sudan. December school exams had to be postponed to this week. For security reasons, this student was told by her mother she could only sit the test if it took place in the UN compound.
I've gone to school for 1 year. For 1 year. For now, I can't stay like that. Better for me to try, whether I will fail or I will pass. What I will do, I will just read with those few books of mine which I brought with me that day. That's how I told her. She told me, okay, you go, but don't go outside.
In all, over 400 children living in UN compounds in Juba sat the exams. At the same time, peace talks in Addis Ababa are not making progress. And fighting continued on Wednesday between government and rebel forces, especially in the northern oil town of Malakal. Salva Kiir's government vowed to defeat Riek Machar's rebels.
The SPLA will fight courageously and will defeat the rebels within and outside South Sudan borders. The government will defeat the rebels forever.
The fighting erupted exactly a month ago. 500,000 people have fled their homes and up to 10,000 have been killed.
Well, for more on this story, Mading Ngor is in South Sudan's capital, Juba, for us.
The latest is Malakal. The battle for Malakal has been raging for the last 2 days. Malakal is surrounded by most of the oil fields. They constitute about 80% production of oil. So who controls Malakal will control the future of this country. So 80% of oil production takes place in Malakal. And the government went from saying that they control Malakal to now saying that they are unsure about who controls the place, because there's fighting going on and reports that the two sides are there. So Malakal is split at the moment.
Mading, we've been reporting on this conflict for a month now, and it's difficult to see how it's moving forward. Are there aspects of the unrest which you feel that we're not seeing or we're not being told about?
Absolutely. There's been a lot of negativity projected in the news media. There have been commentaries suggesting that South Sudan is going to fail, this country is going to collapse, and it's only 2 years old. We will remember that this is a country in transition, and indeed what is not being captured in the international news media is some kind of positivity that is going on. People have been categorizing what is going on as an ethnic war between the Dinka and the Nuer. These are the two largest tribes. But both sides don't tend to capture the positivity. How many Dinka are risking their lives to save their fellow Nuers, and how many Nuers have been risking lives to save their fellow Dinka. These are positive stories I hear from South Sudanese every day, and they are not being reflected in the international media.
So what's the way forward then for South Sudan as somebody who's from there and sees this conflict unfolding every day?
I think this country has a future, and for me, my heroes are those who are fighting to see that this country holds, and indeed the fighting is taking place within the fringe of the society. The center is holding, and if we remember 2 years back, 99% of South Sudanese voted for independence. That didn't mean that they didn't have anything in common. So it's the politicians who are using the population to fight the wars, to advance the negative agendas, but the regular citizen cares about the country and they want to have a future.
Mading Ngor for us there. Now, in Kenya, the trial of 4 men accused of involvement in the Westgate Mall attack in Nairobi last year got underway this Wednesday. The accused are charged with knowingly supporting perpetrators of the attack in September 2013, which killed 67 people. Now, the court is set to hear over 40 different witness accounts this week. The trial continues on Thursday. Now, undeterred following a day of sporadic violence, Egyptians voted in the second and final day of a referendum on the country's new constitution today. Polls are a milestone towards presidential elections and a litmus test of public opinion on the ouster of Islamist President Mohamed Morsi and his Muslim Brotherhood last July. Analysts argue the charter looks certain to win a majority approval following a rather intense media campaign. Next, 4 Rwandans, including a senior military official, are reportedly being held in Mozambique in connection with the killing of former Rwandan spy master Patrick KAREGEYA. Now, according to AP news agency, a police spokesman confirmed the 4 are awaiting extradition to South Africa, where KAREGEYA's body was discovered on January the 1st. Dissidents accuse the Rwandan government of being behind the assassination, a claim which hasn't been proved. Joseph Karambe of the Rwandan National Congress opposition party spoke to France 24 earlier.
This murder is just a threat that was carried out, a long-running threat. We live knowing that death squads are after us. It's been like that ever since we created our party, the Rwanda National Congress, in 2010. One of our members who lives in London, Jonathan Musanera, was chased by Kagame's death squads, and it was MI5 and Scotland Yard that warned him of this.
Well, just some precision there. The Rwandan government refutes such claims and denies targeting dissidents for assassination. Finally, Guinea's Prime Minister and government stepped down this Wednesday as part of a transition to a new regime following the first parliamentary elections in over a decade. The move, confirmed by President Alpha Conde's office, was widely anticipated in line with the West African nation's return to democracy after years of unrest. Resignations come 2 days after the newly elected National Assembly opened for business. Well, you're up to date. More news from your Africa team tomorrow, but the news does continue with Molly Hall.